Welcome to Zen Footsteps. My podcast is designed to invite you to explore new perspectives and challenge the way you see the world. Through engaging conversations with thought-provoking guests, we're going to delve into the idea that you can transform your thinking and inspire personal growth. From redefining success to uncovering unconventional paths to fulfillment, each episode is a step towards expanding your mind and embracing the journey of discovery. So join us as we walk alongside innovators, thinkers, and change makers who can help you see life in a whole new light. Welcome to Zen Footsteps. My guest today is somebody who genuinely makes my wife laugh and makes me laugh, which, believe me, I tell you, in this day and age of wokeism, it's quite unusual. This is Samantha Day, and she was an accountant for 30 years. Now, at the age of 50, she left her job as head of tax for KPMG in London and also became a comedian recently. Now, in the last 6 years, she's really stepped us up on a learning curve, and she says that her income has dropped through the floor, but she's never been happier. Now, like me, Samantha has kids, and they're part of the millennial Gen Z, and they're the things that really inspire her, and they inspire her comedy. And I think that's why I laughed so much when I came across her. Samantha, hi, welcome to Zen Footsteps.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, this is an incredible journey. Like I said, my wife and I were watching you, and explain to people who don't know what Gen Z is.
Okay, Gen Z, I believe, is now people who are 28 and under.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're absolutely lovely. And every generation suffers from its own particular madness. And I'm having a lot of fun with theirs. Um,
It
yeah.
really is, isn't it? Do you know, it's funny because when I was a kid, we were sort of you were kind of a goth, a rocker, a mod, or whatever. And I don't know if you see this, but I don't see this with kids now. I don't see, like, I just see hoodies basically, and I think that they're kind of, we call it wokeism, don't we? I think that that's their kind of challenge.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's that we can't see it, you know? They all look the same to us kind of vibe. Do you know what I mean? All the male auditors always used to look the same to me. It was a real problem. But yeah, I'm sure they're not all the same, but I do think that they are different to us. They've got very different habits. One of the things I discovered, I've got this show called Generation Wars, and it's a game show. There's four generations, and they earn points by being right about everything. And I thought the stand-up would be what people really loved, and they do love the stand-up, but they absolutely love the getting one over on another generation. It's ludicrous, really. But in the course of researching that, I discovered that over half of Gen Z say that they value financial compatibility over physical attraction. Where so they're not going to just go around marrying people they fancy like an idiot. They're going to be a bit more sensible. So yeah, they're different, and of course that's a wild generalization, isn't it? But actually, your generation does impact you far more than you might believe. It probably impacts you more than your own family, really, because our values are the values of our time.
It's true. What was your, when you were growing up, what was your teenage years? What was that time for you? Was it the 80s, 90s? What was it?
Yeah, I was a 80s teenager.
Yeah.
I was 18 in 1987 when I went to university, and I was I was in a funny pincer movement, I guess, because I had my parents are teachers, and they had really high expectations and hopes of me, and I've got quite a mischievous nature. So I was torn between wanting to do the right thing by them and really make the most of every opportunity they gave me at huge personal sacrifice. Not that I was privately educated or anything, but if they could have afforded it, they probably would have done that as well. But they gave me a lot of time, and they didn't have stuff themselves. But at the same time, nothing has ever given me quite as much pleasure as taking the piss. So it's difficult.
It's quite, it's interesting, isn't it? It's quite, do you remember the young ones, Alexa Sale and all that kind of stuff? I think that we really, could rip the pee really out of each other in those days. And People seem to be offended now when when you do that. I mean, I get people coming on and they'll say to me, "Oh, what shampoo do you use? Hello, Harry Potter or Voldemort is the other one I've got." And I actually don't mind. And in some sense, the British humor is to absolutely do that. And the Americans really struggle with it. They think we're insulting each other.
Well, I think, it's not all Brits and all families, but for a lot of British families, taking the mickey out of each other is a form of inclusion. So when I was the only woman in the boardroom at KPMG, one of the things I noticed was the minute I walked into the boardroom, all the banter died. And they would banter with each other, the boys would, but they wouldn't banter with me. And that was probably because it was probably because they didn't like me. But let's say they did like me. It was probably because I was a woman, and they were a bit scared about what you can and can't say to a woman and whether that's different to what you can and can't say to a man. I don't know. Or maybe they just weren't used to having to sort of recalibrate it. But I felt really excluded
Mm.
simply by the fact that I wasn't in on the jokes.
Yeah, I get that. I think that now as well, things have, I don't know, they've gone a bit kind of, the pendulum's gone one way, and I think it needs to swing back a little bit. I mean, I remember this, somebody once saying, I don't think it was true, it's a comedy thing, but somebody goes up to the bar and there's a woman sitting there and gives the woman a piece of paper and he says, "What's this?" And he says, "Well, this is my contract. You need to sign it before I start chatting you up." You know, afraid he's going to be sued or done because he said something that's inappropriate,
Yeah,
you know.
I do feel like I feel on eggshells sometimes with my kids because quite often I'll be having what I believe to be a perfectly sensible conversation, and they'll say, "Mum, Mum, no." And it's not that they're saying you can't say that about things I've said, although they do sometimes say that, but it's more like if you take the trans issue as an issue that's very sort of sensitive,
Very.
I've said to them, why can't we just talk about it? Like, you tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what I think, and it'll be really interesting. And they don't even want to talk about it to me, and don't know, I don't know why that is, because my feeling is if I believe someone's got a really awful opinion, I think let's get it out on the table and have a good old look at this, not let's push it underground so that it can pop up in another form later. So it's comedy is really cathartic like that because you really can. I mean, there are topics that are sensitive that you might stay away from because you want to continue working. But I mean, the the one of the things comedy does do is satirize, which does allow you to go into areas you may not go into sort of seriously.
I think so, and I think it's like if you look at comedy, history of comedy, you look at the politics of comedy too. It was able to get. I mean, the jester had the king's ear. You know, he could
Mm.
say anything. He could take the mickey out of the king or whatever. Nobody took it seriously, so he was able to diffuse. So tell me, let's go back a little bit with your life. So, because it's quite a journey. So how did you go from university to KPMG?
Well, I actually left so I wish I'd had my time again. I wouldn't have been so anxious about earning a living. But because I come from a fairly unaffluent background, my primary focus when I left Oxford and could have done anything with an Oxford maths degree, not anything, but you know what I mean, I had
Yeah.
choices, was to just get a job to pay the bills. And so I got this job as a computer programmer. And within 3 months, that company had gone under. I was like the kiss of death. And then I panicked because I thought I went from thinking I've got an Oxford degree, nothing will ever go wrong in my life ever again because this is a meal ticket, to thinking, oh shit, you can't rely on anything. This is really weird. So then I became an accountant just because I knew it was be safe. And then I loved it. From the minute I got there, I just loved it. It's a good mixture of psychology, people, numbers, all the things I love, really. And yeah, over time, through a tunnel of alcoholism and a divorce that left me with young children on my own, so over quite a long time, I did manage to build a career in accountancy.
So how did you overcome that the demons. I mean, we all have. I did a podcast the other day, and I said, don't trust somebody when they get to 50 if they hadn't had a breakdown. It's
Yeah.
like Churchill called it the black dog, the darkness of the soul. I think you've almost got to go through that and rediscover who you are and come out. So how did you overcome that? Because that's quite something to go through divorce, kids, the whole thing. I mean, a lot of people go through, I know, but what was your personal journey of how you transitioned through that, gave up the alcohol, and then moved into comedy?
Well, I would separate alcohol out from all of it. The reason being that alcohol's a genetic thing, so I've seen it in all of my family. And there's a tendency in alcoholics to say, well, I drink because my wife's awful and my job's awful and my boss is a, you know, I drink because I'm winning, I drink because I'm losing, I drink because I'm happy, I drink because I'm sad. And the reality is they drink because they're an alcoholic. And so you've got to get that out of the way first. So basically, 20 years ago this week, I rang Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was a very unsatisfactory phone call. So I didn't join their ranks, although I now wish I had in a sense, because I feel like I did it on my own when I didn't really need to. But because that didn't work and because I had young children at home, it's quite hard to go out to meetings and stuff anyway. So I bought lots of books on alcoholism, the medical books, try and understand what on earth was going on, and accounts, biographies of people who had given up drinking and how they'd done it. So that was what I did. And it's odd, really, because if you'd tried to make me stop drinking the day before I stopped drinking, I'd have fought you tooth and nail. But on that day, when I took that decision, I really desperately wanted it, like all alcoholics. You're not enjoying drinking by the end. It's a curse that you're stuck with.
And was there a turning point? Was there one moment where I don't know, just often people who I work sometimes with people who've been taking marijuana or cocaine and things like that, and I'll work with them because I can work with them and let them go, but I can't do that with alcohol because you go and then you've got DTs and things like that, and I can't be there to support you in that. So when
Mm.
people come to me and they say, "Can you work with me to stop drinking?" I say, "I can't because you need the support." So did you have any of that support, or were you just bullheaded and strong and determined? You thought, no, I'm going to do this.
I think I wasn't strong and determined. I was powerless. But what happened was I stopped making arrangements for, say, a year's time because I felt really poorly. And I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to be here in a year. I just didn't feel like someone who's going to be here in a year. Then I stopped making arrangements for 6 months' time. And I felt iller and iller and iller. And every day I went to work, the floor was moving and I felt sick. And it got to the stage where I didn't think I'd make it to the end of the week. And that's when I stopped. So it wasn't willpower or great judgment, it was desperation and an acknowledgement that I was trying to use a sick mind to cure a sick mind. And that can't be done.
No, and no, I agree. And the first thing of any addiction is realizing you've got a problem. But as long as you're in denial, it's never going to really sort itself out, is it?
No.
So was from there, did you, what was the light bulb moment then that you think that comedy something you grew up with? Was it a passion that you had within you?
Yeah, not in a structured way. It's where my family go to have fun, to bond with each other, but also to deal with difficult things. So it's both a great thing and a avoidant thing, but it's a habit. So I had that habit in me, but I never thought if someone had said to me you could be a stand-up comedian, I would have just done it from the get-go. But I never thought I would be able to do that. And then there's always a bit of push and pull, isn't there? And basically, I went on a course which was Learn to be a Comedian. And it was a 6 week course. And at the end of it, on the seventh week, you got to do this is my dog Percy.
Hello,
He
Percy.
likes he likes to participate in all of my activities. Um, On the seventh week, you got to do a showcase in Leicester Square. And of the 12 of us, I think nine of us decided we wanted to do that. And when I came off that stage, I thought, oh dear, that is because I loved my job, but I loved that more. And then because I was like, had a big corporate job by that time, I started to gig, but I couldn't cope because I had to be in Canary Wharf for like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be out in Bath doing an open mic night for no money till 1 in the morning. So in the end, I had to choose, and basically something happened in my workplace that made that choice a lot easier for me.
And did you find that in some sense, like with comedy, can almost be like a new addiction? Like I believe there are uh, addictions which are great. You know what I mean? And they're like, I mean, sometimes if I'm painting, I'll get so into a painting, time just disappears. And it's that buzz. I started my life as an actor, and the buzz of coming off stage, it's so addictive. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts going on. Like if you are a bit of a workaholic, like I am, whatever you point it at, it will escalate into workaholism. So I'm very, very diligent as most comedians, I don't mean to be unkind, but they just piss about.
Yeah.
They'll work, an hour a day or something. Whereas I work like it's an office job almost. I work pretty much all day, every day, writing and God knows why I don't produce more, to be honest. But there we are. Um, but there are various addictions going on. So, for example, I've just started to take off a bit on TikTok. I did one video that got lots of views, and now it's kind of snowballing, but only if you keep feeding the monster. And that's good because it means I have to write, I have to produce stuff every single day, and I like that. I like that sort of game. And being creative is wonderful. So writing stand up, performing stand up, it's great. What's not wonderful is being addicted to the reaction. So, like you say, when you come off stage and everyone loves you and thinks you're hilarious, you've got to kind of manage yourself a bit because you're still just you with all your crappy little bits. And TikTok is a monkey because my mum uses that word when she means something much stronger. TikTok is a monkey because I find myself going into TikTok several times an hour,
Wow.
going, oh, I wonder if people are enjoying this one. Oh, how many likes has it got? And I've always associated that with Gen Z. And I've always thought, oh, these Gen Zers, what's wrong with them? Anxious about likes. And it's not actually an anxiety. Well, it's not for me. It's a addiction. It's like a dopamine hit. Oh, look, it's all taking off. It's all so that is the new thing I need to guard against is focusing on the creativity and the input and letting the output be what it's going to be. But it's harder than it sounds.
It's true. I mean, they've done a lot of studies and they've shown that with phones, the algorithm, they know the color you like and things like that. I mean, we've got a really funny
Okay.
one, and which is really fun to do. Well, not fun; it's a bit sinister. But if you try putting your phone down next to you and just talk about anything, like random, something random, like um, oh, I saw a dog that was abducted by a UFO. Watch how quickly you get videos popping about abduction and UFO. It's quite scary, and the algorithms really got you, Pat. They know you better than you know yourself, So
I
you
know, I always think that when I look at, let's say my daughter says, oh, I can use her iPad or something, I think, oh, what are all these weird adverts? They're not adverts for dog products or like anti-aging stuff. They're all these other weird things. I didn't know they had those because your adverts are incredibly tailored, aren't they?
that'd be a great again a comedy thing, like telling your ads, we got what do you get, tenner lady,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
us. And
exactly. I get all sorts of things. I
I
think, why do you think I want that?
I started getting Saga now. I
Have
mean,
you?
you really know when you're coming to because they go, you never know what a Saga holiday is going to be like.
I never want to know what a saga holiday. And then you think, oh, actually, how much is it?
It's true, and shall I just go and maybe it'll be okay and everything's
Yeah, just
okay.
being nice. Why am I being so horrible? And actually, one of my friends, because of course, I'm 56, so
Mm.
most of my friends are my age, a bit older actually, because I have my children a bit younger than most people. Um, but they tell me things. Oh, did you know you can get this little benefit if you're over 55 and so on? And I'm like, oh, oh, pathetic.
So tell me, what's your accent? It sounds sort of Devon nose or something like that.
Nearly slightly northeast of Devon. It's Gloucestershire.
Okay, because the reason I ask that is that I've noticed from different areas. Like I'm South African originally, and I've got a bit of French in me, so I'm a mongrel, and I tend to find that I have certain things that I find funny, not funny. Is there a regional thing that you find?
Totally. And the biggest regional difference is the difference between London and out of London. So out of London, so in London there's a comedy club called Comedy Unleashed, and it's where it's called free speech comedy. Sorry about that dog. And arguably outside of London there'd be no, everywhere's comedy unleashed outside of London. But in London, Percy, go over there. We cannot stay in there.
He wants to be on the action.
Ah. Um, outside of London, they're nowhere near as PC. In London, it's interesting because to start with, I was kind of not doing very well in London because I was censoring my act. You know how people go on live at the Apollo and people go, "Oh, the comedians on live at the Apollo, they're not very good, are
Mm.
they?" And the reason is they're all really good club comedians who've had their material sort of slightly sanitized for television, and it isn't quite the same. It's still great, but it's not the same. And that was happening to me in London. So now I go in and I lean further in. So I become almost like a caricature of this non-PC, middle-aged woman. And that works fine.
Who would you align yourself most with? If you looked at a comedian, you look up to them, a female comedian, who would you say, wow, they really inspire me?
Well, Catherine Ryan has got a really high gag rate in her stand-ups. There's a lot of jokes, and that's something that a lot of modern comedy hasn't got. It's not quite as densely jokey or as structured jokey, and I really like the way she does it. But I also like lots of American comics as well. And I've been working with a woman called Amanda Baker, who's Jimmy Carr's director.
Okay.
He runs courses in London, and they're absolutely fantastic because she really understands the nuts and bolts of how comedy works. So if you're a bit analytical, it's really interesting. I mean, you have to then practice, practice, practice. So it can become quite a bit like yoga. You've got to do it every day, a bit like going to the gym. But she has got us all looking at American comics because they are really good.
Because I want to pick up on something on Jimmy Carr, which you said too, because you're talking about the nuts and bolts of comedy and the American comedians. And Jimmy Carr, I've seen a lot on TV, and I didn't really laugh. But then I laughed at Jimmy Carr when I saw him when he wasn't. Somebody filmed him. I think he was at a club or something, and he was really, really funny and very, very clever. And I thought, I really understand what you're saying live at the Apollo and how they censor and sanitize it. Um,
Yeah, and I think with Jimmy Carr, he's a one-liner comedian, or he's a, joke to joke comedian is probably a better way to describe it. And each person has their preferences, just as you like some music and you don't like others. And there is a tendency to believe that your preferences are superior to other preferences. But the fact is they're just a preference. And my preference is not really joke to joke comedy. I like routines that are elegantly constructed and finish with a twist in the tail. I love that. And Jimmy Carr was on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, and he was explaining how actually he's good at writing jokes now. He's got thousands of them, but he isn't brilliant yet at constructing routines. And I thought that was really cool of him to
he is
say that.
honest. It's
Yeah,
honest, isn't
comedians
it?
aren't great at saying what they're not good at, are they? That's
No, I
not.
mean I always think of the comedians like the sad clown. when everybody's gone and the makeup's off and the tears. And I've got a friend of mine, he's incredibly funny, but I'm one of the few people, if we go out with him, he can be himself, but he has to be funny for everybody else. And it almost becomes a cover. He
Mm.
invents a pseudonym of something else because he can't just be himself. He's had to be so defensive most of his life. And he uses comedy as a deflection, really, I suppose.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you use it as an uplift, just as, some people might go for a run because they know it's good for their mental health. If you're someone that knows, well, actually, I can cheer myself up. It's temporary, it's hedonic, it's not the answer, but it's helpful in the moment, then why not, have a few hours of joking around and enjoying that part of that day.
Yeah.
That's valid.
No, I think it's important because one of the comedians that I liked for that reason to some extent, he just showed how life can be also dark but also very funny, was Billy Connolly in his
Mm.
early days when he did observational humor. And what I loved about him was that he would weave the story of being on the Clyde and his background and his heritage, and it was really rich. And people laughed because they everybody in the family had someone like that, or who he was talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And so on the Gen Z thing with the kids, how do they respond to you? Do kids find you funny, or do they go, "Oh, mum"?
Yeah, people of their age who aren't my children find me hilarious. Um, but it's interesting. The children have been always like it about everything. So, like when I got a Harley Davidson, they were like, "Oh, mother, that's so embarrassing." When I got a tattoo, "Oh, that's so embarrassing." But then when I've done it, they're all right with it. When I said I was going to have my hair dreadlocked, they were just like, "No, oh no, you can't. Oh my God." And now I've done it, they're fine with it. But they are at that age where they are very interested in what they're going to do, and rightly so. So they don't show any huge interest in what I'm doing, and that is what it is.
I think they have to rebel. I think I once heard that children have to push against you, otherwise they'll never leave home. Because
Yeah, I heard that too, that you
y-
you know
you know,
you ought to kind of get to a point where you really don't want to be together
yeah,
and they can be happy again.
and
But
they've got
ours
to own their music,
don't.
right?
Mm.
They've got to own their music, the style, the fashion. I mean, I even remember being in the back of my car, when I was a kid in the back of the car. The times when we didn't have all the fancy cars and your parents would lean forward and get a kind of thing, almost like mopping the thing.
Yeah,
And are we there yet? Are we yet there yet? And those disgusting, what were they? There was those ties in the 70s. I don't even remember them.
like
The big,
cravats.
yeah, ridiculous things. But we thought we were so cool.
I think we should bring them back. I like a cravat. I
No,
mean,
I
I haven't
got,
had one for a long time, but I think you could rock a cravat.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
you can imagine it.
I'd be cool in the caftan. I'd probably put it over my head. But my
Yeah,
kids, my kids do. They same thing. Oh, dad. I mean, the dad jokes, right? I mean,
yeah.
but your kids, I'm sure that they're really kind of proud of you and you're a cool mum. And people will probably say, wow, your mum's really cool.
I don't know what they say. I try not to think about it because I think it's a bit like what I was saying about audience responses, TikTok responses. You can stop worrying about what your family think. 'Cause some of the stuff I say, I know my parents would really rather I didn't say, but it's art,
Yeah.
and you have to unmask yourself and explore, what this world looks like from your point of view. And you can't look at it, there's no shame in that.
No,
Uh,
I agree. I think that to laugh at oneself is probably very healthy. I like that quote, don't take life too seriously, it's only a temporary situation.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and I like to think that today I was driving along in the car on the way to work and I was thinking recently we had a friend whose unfortunately father passed away and we went to visit and to see him and it's quite an old-fashioned thing. They have an open sort of casket and I saw this sort of shell really. And for the first time ever, I really understood Shakespeare's Hamlet when he's saying "Alas, poor Yorick" and holding it up, and you really see there's this life, this animation, And I look back at my younger self and I think, wow, why didn't you listen to that music or do those things? I think I took myself far too seriously.
I think we all do. I think you go through phases, in your life. But when you're in your 20s or whatever, you're trying to move into adulthood and you
Wow.
think that adulthood is a serious business. So you try and, be a bit less daft if you can. And then I think you get to a stage where you realize it's adulthood's a difficult business. And the more you can laugh about it, the better, really.
Yeah, I had somebody said to me, when you hit the teenage years, when they come out the teenage years, they'd be okay. And then I realized, of course, from a medical point of view, the brain doesn't set till it's 25. And I went, oh no, just when I thought this was over, I'm now going to wait until they're 25. And then I've got that point now where my kids are starting to talk about babies, and it's really funny because there's a part of me goes, this is great. Another part of me goes, I'm going to be a granddad.
Yeah.
So you suddenly feel old again. One thing that I was going to talk to you about because you did it so well. I was watching you, and you had a heckler, and you handled it with such finesse. You kind of A lot of comedians they start to get aggy about it, but you turned it around, and you almost made the heckler part of the show. Do you have set up lines for hecklers? Do you practice at all thinking, right, if someone heckles me, this is what I'll do?
I don't have set up lines, although there are kind of go-to put downs, I suppose. But I do have an attitude that's ready for them. And the attitude is whatever they say, I assume they're flirting with me. And I just make it bigger and bigger and bigger until they stop talking because they think she's got the wrong end of the stick and I don't want to be in this situation. But most of the time, when people heckle you, they're trying to help, they're trying to join in, they've got
Yeah.
overexcited, they've forgotten. Because stand-up's a really weird art form or form of entertainment. Because if you're at the theatre watching a play, everybody understands your job is to sit in your seat and shut the fuck up. And you can clap at the end and you can laugh if it's funny, but otherwise, nothing. Whereas in comedy, the style that stand-up's got is it sounds conversational. It's not a conversation, but it sounds a bit like one, and it's a bit confusing if you don't go to comedy all the time. And I think some people just get a bit excited. I've never had anyone be really malicious. Um, they may have started thinking I'm gonna see what I can make of this, but most of the time they either change their mind or they never started in that way in the first place.
Do you think it goes back to the KPMG kind of boardroom thing where, as a woman, they look at you and then they think, I'm just being an absolute idiot. And they feel like other people in the room are going to go, mate, you're out of order, be a gentleman.
Maybe being a woman's, it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm seeing women have a very hard time in comedy clubs, actually. So I don't
Yeah.
think it protects you, but I think it does change the dynamic, which is why I go to flirtation, like, please, um, because it suits the dynamic. Um, because the only way of sort of evidencing that it's not a flirtation is to become openly aggressive, which isn't isn't socially acceptable. So it's kind of protective in that way. But and it's funny, it's good fun, because whatever they say, I can play with it. Um, but no, I don't think it comes from the boardroom. And the reason for that is when I was in business, the person with the most power in the room tended to be the person with the most flexibility, who could kind of emotionally move into and out of other people's spaces and kept everyone connected. And I was quite good at that. Um, but it comes at a price. And the price is you have to hold your own emotions quite tight, high levels of emotional control. To be a great comedian, you need to be able to really express yourself. You see, the reason Basil Fawlty is funny is because he gets so angry. He wouldn't be funny if he got a bit pissed off. He's funny because he gets beside himself over something and nothing. So letting everything go is unlearning things is harder than learning things. which is why, with a dog, it's much rather than saying get down, get down, get down, it's much better to ask them to sit because it gives them something positive to do. And this is a bit the same. So even things like my accent, if you heard me talking 5 or 6 years ago, it wouldn't be quite as obvious that I was from the West Country as it is now, because I'm sort of trying to let go of the BBC language.
Mm.
When I went to Oxford, I just realised I went to St Catherine's and everybody else was saying St Catherine's and I was saying St Catherine's. And when someone pointed it out to me, it made me feel really small because I thought, oh God, I can't even say the name of the college. So I learned to put on this sort of corporate mask, but now I've got to take the bloody thing off. It's a nightmare.
Because that's really, I mean, that, yeah, I mean, I hate snobbery, and that's a real snobbery thing.
So you've
I
written,
Yeah,
we've
no, it is. I get a lot of assumptions made by my accent. People think I've been to boarding school and stuff, and I haven't. Because I'm a mix of everything. You know what I mean? I'm a
got a
mongrel.
mongrel.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm proud of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
He's
I'm
a
so,
rescue, everyone. He's a rescue.
I'm so. I mean, my wife says to me, she says, being South African, we're known for being quite blunt. Um, but in a sense, if I like you, I like you. You know what I mean? You know, right?
Yeah.
And I'd rather someone say, I think you're an absolute idiot. And I go, great, well, we don't have to hang out together, but at least I know I'm not going to waste my time on you, you know?
Yeah.
And I prefer that. And I do think that I was talking the other day about this tall poppy syndrome that we have in the UK as well. And I think about people who they make it in business, they become very, very well known, very powerful. But unless you've been to the right school, have the right accent, sorry, Johnny, you're not really part of the club, you know. I still think we have that in this country.
We
And
sort of have to. So if you think about, we have these, we used to have these outreach sort of things into, because Canary Wharf, of course, where I used to work, is right cheek and jowl by some of the poorest parts of East London.
mm,
Canning Town's just down the road, and Canning Town isn't posh. So one of the things that the firm used to do was these kind of apprenticeship programs, and they would take a disproportionate number of people that had gone to schools that weren't the kind of schools that gave you an unfair advantage. And there is a kind of, nobody wants to talk about it, but there's a reality, which is if you talk differently to boardroom talk, there'll be a resistance. And it's normally from within, and it's people saying, oh, it's not what our clients are used to, it's not what our clients expect, which is true, unfortunately.
yeah,
But of course, until you change it, it will always be true.
I mean, I remember at school having uniforms, and I was like, I can't wait to leave school, don't have to wear a uniform, and then you realize you're just changing it for another uniform.
Of course you
You
are.
know, it's either I mean, the 80s was it what, paisley ties, brogues, pencil skirts for girls, wasn't it? And you had to be the big shoulder pads, the whole thing that we kind of
Lots
went
of
through.
hair, massive hair.
Loads of
Doesn't matter
I
what style it was, as long as it was massive.
the days I actually had hair. I'm a bit like you when people come in and they talk about. I got a couple of go-tos, which is when somebody says about what shampoo do you use. I say, oh, wash and go, things like that. Or I say, when you've had cancer, this is what it's like, you know.
Oh, that's me.
But it's mean, but it's true because I had cancer. So
Oh, fair play.
so I feel
Yeah,
like
if you've had cancer, that's allowed.
I've had cancer, so I feel I'm sorry. I mean, if I hadn't had cancer, I think it was pretty dark.
That would be very mean.
But
Yeah.
I have, and therefore I feel I can own it. And I remember this friend of mine. I said that he should have been a comedian. He's just very, very funny. He's corporate, right? And I remember when I came out the hospital from cancer, he volunteered to pick me up. He says, because I want to pick you up in a 4x4 because the bumps in the road, you've had surgery, things like that. And I think he turned to me at something like, "You look a bit pale, mate." He said, "Anybody would have thought you had cancer. What's wrong with you?" So it was that black humor, but I like that because it I wouldn't take myself so seriously.
Well, it diffuses tension as
It
well,
does.
doesn't it? It does. Yeah. But I think if you are someone that likes straight talking, Britain must be quite you've got to get used to it, haven't you? Because that's the last thing the British people do is straight talking. We are
Yeah,
absolute Olympic standard passive aggressive, aren't we? So,
100%. I mean, if you did it, if somebody be interesting, a comedian to get up and say, no, in fact, I think you did it. I was watching one of your things where you say something, but this is actually what it means. You did,
Maybe,
don't you? Yeah,
maybe, yeah.
yeah, I remember. I'm sure you did something like that. So do you talk me through the kind of process? I'm really fascinated because I'm just not a naturally funny person. Um, but what's your process of getting to something that's funny? Do you like my daughter? My daughter sings. She has a process for composing a song that's hers. What's your process?
Well, all comedy has got exaggeration, wordplay, and misdirection in it. So I would always start off with something that I think I'm really familiar with. I did a video this week about it's called When a Cardo Goes Wrong, right? So when a cardo goes wrong, it's when, the substitute isn't something you would have wanted. They've got it wrong and oh no, now we're going to have to go up to M&S at the BP to replace it, and you find yourself having these things. So I think, aha, and that's the time to start exaggerating it, misdirecting, and putting some wordplay in there. And jokes are structured. So all jokes have got that in. And a joke won't always sound like a joke, so it won't always start an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman, but it will have all those things in, even if it's just a sentence. So, well, good joke, though. So, I really love, I start off kind of freehand, just throwing thoughts down. I write 10 jokes a day as sort of free thoughts. And I do those while I'm walking my dog. I talk them into my phone. And then I start to craft them, tighten them up, put the punch word at the end, change soft sounds for consonants so that it kicks out. All sorts of technical things to make them stronger jokes.
It's
But it all
quite, it's
starts with kind of a feeling,
yeah,
which is
it's
this
amazing
is
because I never
particular.
would have thought that. I mean, it sounds. I mean, it's a craft, right?
Hmm,
And it's
it's
really,
really technical.
it's really interesting because I like who's the other comedian like Peter Kay?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I just like those things where you go, yeah, and I think that's why I laugh at your stuff is because I identify with the things you're saying, especially
And
with
that's
the
the
Gen Z.
first bit. That's the first bit when you're feeling something, oh, that is just inherently a bit daft, a bit funny. That's what he's picked up. But then if you go back to Peter Kay and watch him
Mm.
back, you'll see he's doing all the things I've just talked about.
It's so clever because
Mm.
we've been watching second part of Car Share,
Mm.
and I think I would have never thought taking such a simple idea could be funny, but I really like it.
Mm. And it is a loaded sort of situation, isn't it? Because when someone gets in a car with you and maybe you don't know them that well, or maybe they're a great friend or whatever, there's a sort of, okay, what we're going to talk about. So it's a good premise to start with.
Yeah, it puts you in an uncomfortable situation, doesn't it? So you're kind of forced to. And have you drawn anything from your own childhood?
Yes, I've drawn more from my adulthood, I think. But it's hard to distinguish between the two, really, isn't it? But I think my so when I talk about exaggeration, that applies to your persona as well. So the me I am on stage is quite a horrible person, and I'm quite horrible, but I'm not that horrible. So she's very exaggerated version, but I do understand me a bit more when I try to exaggerate. She's very manipulative, this woman. I'm a bit manipulative. She's very passive aggressive. I'm a bit passive aggressive under pressure. So you do start to notice things about yourself. And when you're trying to find your comic persona, one of the things that was suggested to me was think of all the things that someone who doesn't like you, or maybe your partner that knows you really well on a really bad day, would say are your worst qualities. That's your comic persona.
Because I like your reference to when you keep saying Mr. Day, you know,
Mm.
Mr.
Yeah.
Day. I think that's really, really clever. It reminds me of the days of Hyacinth and and all those comedians. And I
Mm.
look back at those comedians and I think, wow, they were really clever,
Mm.
you
Yeah,
know.
it's kind of disrespectful and respectful at the same time. That's an ultimate passive aggressive, isn't it? Call
So
someone
where
totally.
do we go in terms of what's your in terms of where you're going now? What's your kind of 5-year plan, as it were?
Well, at my age, the reality is agents and TV companies aren't interested in me. And so luckily we live in a more democratic world of entertainment now where there is this online route through. So the only route through for me really is online. So that's what I've just sort of realised and started working on. And I mean, my ambition is to always be on stage because that's the bit I love. But I need to generate my own audience, and online is the way in which I can do that. So that is my plan.
Yeah, I think I did the same with TikTok. What I did was I went onto TikTok, create the audience first, because I've written books and I wanted to sell books, but nobody knew who I was. And
Mm.
so what I've done is I've created that. I've gone backwards, and I think that's a really clever way to do that, because if you're getting views like you are on TikTok and people are noticing you, there's going to be some agent out there going, we can take a punt on her because look,
Yeah,
people
if you
really
can
like her.
prove that you might be able to generate some money,
Yeah.
then they might be interested in me. That's another option.
How
Yeah.
easy it is to get into the comedy club though, in Leicester Square, is that still going? I don't know if that's still going, is it?
The Comedy Store in
Yeah.
Leicester. Yeah, that's still going strong.
Okay.
Um, I've done that once. I didn't do very well. I went sort of too early, really, and
Yeah.
my set was good, but I was a little bit nervous, and the tiniest bit of nerves really shined through, and I made it too big in my head. Oh my God, it's the London Comedy Store. I
Yeah.
wouldn't do that now, but anyway, so I'll have to sort of wait for them to have faith in me again. But there's so many comedy clubs now, it doesn't really matter. Do you know what I mean? My diary is absolutely rammed with gigs.
That's brilliant.
There's not millions of good female comics, and that's not because women aren't good at it, it's
Mm.
because not many female comics. So only 20% of the circuit, I think, is female.
But something you do as well, which I mean, it's nothing to do with being PC or anything else like that. But I feel in your comedy you don't need to do it. Is a lot of female comedians. I remember, I'll give you an analogy of this. So you have a boardroom, and this woman was having counseling, and she was saying, I'm going into the boardroom, and all the men are just kind of ignoring me and everything. And the counselor essentially said to the woman, look at the way you're dressing. So what she was doing was she was dressing like the men. And she said, just go in and dress like you want to dress. And she did this, and all of a sudden these little boys were like putty in her hand, you know? And it's the same thing as that I see a lot of female comedians, it's like every second word is a swear word, and
Mm,
it almost becomes, it just, for me, it just tracks from, there's a particular, I won't name the person, there's a particular female comedian. I used to love her in the early days, and then suddenly it just became one swear word after the other. And I kind of, sometimes I feel that's kind of lazy, shock value lazy. Whereas with you, I've noticed that once in a while you'll say something, but it's not all the time. So I'm hooked onto the story that you're telling as opposed to the shock value. Is that a
oh,
fair
thank
comment?
you. Yeah, that's a very nice compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
I
and I
am
mean it.
trying to do that. I am trying to say something interesting.
Yeah,
If I swear, it might be to illustrate that I am really angry if
yeah,
I'm telling a story about being angry, because that's what people do when they're angry. That's what I do when I'm angry.
yeah,
But I I wouldn't really take much pride in getting laughs because I'd said a shocking, funny swear word.
yeah,
Actually, of course, things have really moved on as well. So there was a time when the young ones was sort of funny because they were all sort of a bit anarchic and shouty and what have you. It hasn't aged very well
no.
because society's changed so much that actually the boundaries about what can and can't be said are different now. So yeah, I think all you can do is be unique and be yourself, isn't it? And there's so much pleasure in that. I kind of think, although I am wildly ambitious, and I'm stupidly ambitious, but even though that's the case, I'm very interested in producing work that I'm really proud of. And actually, if I look at what I did a year ago, I'm quite ashamed of it because it's not as good as if I did it now. But that's because I'm on a really steep learning curve. So,
But you're
of course,
growing, and Jordan Peterson has said this, and without repeating himself again and again in podcasts, but it was something that it really struck home. In life, you meet people in life, or somebody says something, and for some reason they say something, and it just for the rest of your life you'll never forget it. And he was questioned once about what would you tell your former self to do differently, and he stopped like he always does, and he actually contemplated, and he said nothing. He says, "I'm not going to betray my former self." So in a sense, you did what you did because that's where you were. But if you hadn't have done what you did, you wouldn't be who you are now. It's the journey, right?
yeah.
And I think even your journey from alcoholism, KPMG, these are just part of your journey. Makes you, you can stand up in front of people and you can see somebody who's maybe in corporate in the audience and they're having a go at you maybe, and but you can go, yeah, but maybe that's because their boss is a twat, or because you understand that.
Mm.
I don't think a lot of people can do that. I think if you try to be a comic because you've been to the best schools in the country and somebody's giving you some money and that, it's just not genuine.
No, it's not, but there is something. So I sort of the way in which I agree with you is I think comedy comes more naturally when there's something to push against, there's an adversity of some kind. So
Yeah.
I get that, if you've been born with a silver spoon in your mouth, what have you really had to sort of contort yourself over? At the same time, being a comedian is a very badly paid job for a long time. And so, if you happen to have a bit of cash behind you, you're at a distinct advantage. And specifically, Edinburgh is unplayable if you haven't got a bit of cash behind you. So, basically, when I left KPMG, the money I had then, I am now spending till I die. And so, you know, I want to live a long time and I don't,
Mm.
I don't know how long it's going to last, basically, but I have got some cash behind me. So I do go to Edinburgh. And it's nice to be able to do that. And actually, I haven't got, 30 years to make this work. So I need to be taking every opportunity to practice, practice, practice.
But you're
But
being
that
but
is
you're being
reality.
true to yourself though. That's the thing I look at is that okay, maybe it doesn't work, but that's not the point. The point is that you're being true to yourself and you're living your dream. That takes balls, right? I mean, a lot of people don't do that. I always say to somebody, if I gave you £1 million and would you leave the job you're in? And if they say yes, I always think you're kind of living a half life because it takes courage to follow your dreams and your inspirations. It's not easy. It's never meant to be easy. That's the point.
Yeah, that's true. But it is easier if you've got some cash behind you, like
100%.
everything.
Well,
So,
it's easy to be spiritual with a pound in your pocket, right?
yeah. Yeah. And we see it, don't we? When we're well slept, we're more generous. When we're, you know, not burdened by debt and worry, we're more
Mm.
generous. So there is a sort of emotional freedom associated with a certain level of comfort. So, yeah, that worries me about the circuit because there's loads of voices that we don't hear because the idea of them spending the time, just can't spend the time I spend writing comedy. They've got a lot longer to write it, so it doesn't really matter. But because they got to be a barista for 7 hours
Mm.
a day to pay the rent.
That's my daughter. She's working. I think she works about 6 days a week. And she's
Is this a musician one?
yeah. She went to drama school, and she these days you have to be triple threat. You have to be able to sing, dance, and act. When I was doing
Yeah.
acting, you could just one or the other. Do you know what I mean? But she's determined and she's driven, and that's what's going to get her there. And she
Yeah.
always says to me, like when she does an audition, she'll always say. She knows that you might not get the part. She says, I understand that, but she'll always say thank you. She always leaves that impression because they might go, oh, do you remember that polite girl that said thank you? And her dream is it's important to follow it. And we try with the kids to not hothouse them or say you've got to go and be a banker or a lawyer and whatever. I think it's important that they live their dream. And there's a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Have you come across it at all?
No.
It's really lovely. It's sort of people come up to the prophet and they ask him, "Tell us of children, tell us of marriage, tell us of that." And one of the things they say, "Tell us of children," and he says, "Children are from you, but not of you." And do you not marvel when you pull back the bow and see how far the arrow flies? You are the bow, and the children, are the arrow. And I always try to remember that because my kids they've left home and they're doing things, and suddenly it was like, oh, I call them up. They go, Dad, I'm having a coffee. I'm really busy. I'm really busy.
Yeah, no, it's quite a hard transition. And I think it's quite an interesting sort of not quite a paradox, but slightly paradoxical in the sense that, yeah, you don't want to hothouse your kids or tell them what to do because you want them to live their own life. But at the same time, it's still true to say that if you want to be brilliant at something, you
Mm.
almost need to develop an obsession for it because those there's never a wasted hour. All the time you spend perfecting and learning pays back. And, I used to say to my kids, if you just do like 10% more than everybody else, compound that up over a lifetime, you'll be miles ahead of them. And it's not because life's a race or a competition, except it is a bit. If you really
Mm.
want to, I don't know, be England footballer, there's only 11 people in the team. They can't make it 12 because someone else wants to go. So it is competitive. And it's not about competing against other people, it's about competing for the right to do the thing that you love.
And I think you've got to compete against yourself. I mean, I'm
Mm.
a really hard taskmaster on myself, but I believe in really just live life, enjoy life, I mean, if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability, but with fun and love and compassion, because it is short. I mean, I look at my parents died in their 80s and I think, wow, I'm going to be 60 this year. And I'm thinking, that's not a lot of time. And
Mm.
so don't live a half life because in fear is a half life. That's the way I try to say to my kids. Just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? The energy you put into something, negative or positive, is the same energy. So you might as well be positive about it, right?
That is true. And I guess there are ways in which that could be misinterpreted as like there will be days that are hard,
Yeah.
there'll be days that aren't fun, and you're looking sort of longer term at the same time, aren't you? It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I don't know the answer for myself, because I'm a slave driver on myself. And part of me is really pleased about that because I think, God, you've packed a lot in. No wonder, you've been under the
Mm.
cosh for your whole life. But there are days when I think I wish I could just relax a bit more.
It's important. I went for a massage today and I've made a promise to myself that once a month that's what I'm going to do because I'm happy to treat patients, but then my wife will say, "What would you tell a patient?"
Mm.
You know, and it is about
That's a
slowing.
really good question. What would you tell a friend?
Yeah.
And honestly, if I was talking to a friend in my position now, I would probably say, will it really stop you being a great comedian if you
Mm.
go and have an hour of, some sort of self-care?
Yeah,
Because
you
you
need
have,
you need you need you need the downtime. It's I have, we have bucket lists in life. One of my bucket lists is to have a whole day of treatment, but I won't tell each therapist I've had treatment. So I'll start with Indian head massage and work my way down to reflexology at the end.
go,
But I
I
won't,
need, oh,
and I'll work my way bit by bit. So
I
listen,
feel better. I feel therapized. I feel inspired to go and do nothing.
but then you feel guilty sometimes. I do sometimes feel guilty when I'm one of the hardest things I've had to learn, I don't know if you're the same, but it's just the word is no. How powerful that word means.
Mm.
No means no, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is like self-care all feels, if you're a 1980s child or
Mm,
whatever we are, um, it feels like selfishness. It feels like self-indulgence. So I
does.
might say to my girls, I'll go and have a walk and a rest and blah, blah, blah. But I would find it more unnatural to say that to myself. I do it, but.
I think we had a lot of guilt in the 80s. I mean, I know that, with the miners' strikes and everything else like that, and the dole, and there was a lot of there was for a time a bit of an Americanism where you felt like you could achieve anything, right? You can
Yeah.
dream that dream. There was a time when that happened, and I think that was actually a lovely time. We thought we could. We used to go to. Do you remember Smolensky's?
Mm.
Yeah. So I used to. I did a bit of time in Canary Wharf as well, but used to work for an oil company at the time of all things. And Smolensky's. I mean, it was Haagen-Dazs. What's the record? Tower Records, wasn't it?
Mm.
And
And
Hard Rock.
wild consumerism,
Yeah.
because nobody quite realised what the downside of that was likely to be. So we were just enjoying the upside of consumerism, weren't we?
That was
And
brilliant. I mean,
wild kind of ambition as well. Like
mm,
it wasn't embarrassing to be ambitious.
I loved
Um,
it. It
yeah.
was a really special time, Carnaby. I used to go up to a rock and roll shop in Victoria and buy teddy boy drapes, because that's where and the wing collars. And it wasn't that long ago I had a toe pinned because of the amount of dancing and rock and roll I was doing on my toes all the time. But now, it's like, I'd be dancing, I'd be like in the corner, sort of ready to barf or something, because my, like this. I can't do it. Now I mean, now it's sort of like, oh, Epsom salt bath, perfect.
Yeah.
It's totally different. So listen, so how can people reach you? Because I'm hoping that obviously a lot of people are going to hear this, and
Yeah.
a lot
Come
of
on,
people want to
everybody.
book you. We need to book Samantha in.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Well,
what's the best way?
the
Because I
best
know you've
thing
got
to
a
do is see
website.
if you like me, I suppose, isn't it? So if they go on to the TikTok,
Okay.
young people,
Yeah.
well, you're on it, aren't you? The
Yeah.
TikTok
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah.
I am Samantha Day Time. I know it's clever, isn't it?
Very
Samantha
clever.
Day Time. And then on the Instagram,
Yeah.
for the medium people,
Yeah.
I'm Samantha Day Time. There we go. And on the Facebook for the old people,
Yeah.
I'm Samantha Day, and I'm a bit harder to find because it started off as my personal account, but it's linked to my Instagram.
Okay.
So I think if you put Samantha, actually, if you go on my website, which is samanthadaytime.com,
Yeah.
all the links are in there.
Your photographs. Who did those photographs?
Carla Gowlett, who's an absolute genius. Don't I know why you're going, God, your photograph. I know why you're doing that because I do look amazing in them, don't I?
They look great anyway, but
I
I
look
mean
about 26, and
but they're
it's not
really
even lighting. It's not even makeup. It's lighting.
it's so clever. And the is there a color for a comedian? But the colors are vibrant, and they've got you like you look at your photos, then you're not sort of, you know what I mean? You're not
Yeah,
posed sort of Madonna type stuff. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're funny, and you look like you're actually genuinely laughing at something. So
yeah, I was. She's quite funny.
it's really, really
Yeah,
good.
Carla Gowlett. She's a brilliant photographer. She's based in Frederick Street in London.
Wow. I know I really admire anybody who's great at their craft.
Mm.
So listen, we have a tradition, a closing tradition,
Oh,
and favorite quote, but I want to know why.
okay. So I don't know who said this.
Yeah.
However, I think it might have been Lionel Shriver, but I'm not sure. Um, and the quote is "In loss, liberation,"
Wow.
because when I first came across that quote, I was going through a breakup, but I was actually in a relationship with an alcoholic, and actually letting him go was really good for both of us.
Yeah.
So that quote resonates for lots of reasons. When I left my first husband, it was a huge liberation,
Mm.
but it felt like a loss to start with. You've got to get used to it. When I didn't really envisage leaving my job when I did. That was a confluence of different things. But wow, how glad am I that I left my job when I did. Um, And yeah, life is full of loss, isn't it? I've
It
sort of
is.
got empty nest syndrome now. I
Yeah.
miss my kids. I was a single
Yeah.
mum, so I spent a lot of time with them and I miss them. But I could not be gadding around the country gigging if I had three kids clinging to my legs still. So yeah, I'm focusing on the liberation and really enjoying it.
Because everything is a time and a season. I mean, when you said that in it, I felt like in terms of loss, giving up the ego part of ourselves, maybe, which is very difficult. Do you know what I mean? To be vulnerable, to sacrifice that part as well. And there is overcoming fear. One of the things that I'd said right at the beginning about you, which I admire, is that a lot of people would not, out of pure fear, ever have left a job like you did. And I think there's an honesty and to yourself that you've done that as well, which is really powerful.
Yeah,
Because when there was a lot of near-death experience videos sometimes I was watching, and what seems to be really apparent in every single story, without a doubt, it's they don't care about your qualifications, your money. What they care about is how you treated other people. But how
yeah,
you're kind to yourself is top of the list on that, I think.
yeah.
You know.
No, that's a very, very good point. And it was funny actually because going from being pretty competent at what I was doing to being wildly incompetent at what I was doing, I thought would be terrifying. It was actually a lovely release, not to be the one that's supposed to have the answers, to
Mm,
be the one that could honestly say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm not even supposed to. I've literally done it twice. It was so nice. Um, and it still is actually, because I'm still a newbie
mm.
after 5.5 years.
That's liberating to not know what's around the corner.
Mm,
There's
yeah.
a there was a this is a true story. There was a guy, and he would organize that you had to meet up. Let's say I think it was in Soho. You met up in Soho, a whole bunch of you, and he had two dice, and he'd roll the dice, and let's say it came up nine. So you'd have to wait for a number nine bus. You got a number nine. He'd roll it. There was three. You had to get off at the third stop, and it was like random things, and they ended up rolling it, and it was numbered four. So it's right. They said right, Fourth Street. We turned down. They heard this music, and they just went into this flat in the middle of the East End, ended up a party. But it was this whole absolute. I'm just going to have faith and trust.
Random.
Completely where life takes me, right? I mean, wow. I don't know if I could be so brave, even. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. It's a, it's something different, isn't
Yeah,
it? Because we try and we try and minimize the amount of randomness in our lives.
yeah.
It's a funny thing to do because actually there's a 50% chance that something random might be brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. You never know. It's true. Listen, thank you. I've been really looking forward to this. And I never know how the questions are going to go or where it's going to take us, and it's really nice. I feel like I kind of know you kind of away from the comedy a bit,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, I haven't said a single funny thing all the time we've been together, and I hope that has helped you to feel you know the real me.
yes, no, thank you, and I'm really hoping that people are going to reach, and do keep in contact with me, by the way, because obviously we're TikTok pals. So do let me know. I'd love to know, and obviously down here we've got some great places, and if you're ever down this way and you're doing a gig, please let me know, and I'll whip up the National Express.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you.
Lovely. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
That's absolute pleasure.
See you soon.